Hello everyone, this is Sean Hargreaves, and here I'm going to just demonstrate. I'm painting over a piece of student work here, an assignment that I had my students do based on using something as inspiration. Here we have a building, and the assignment was to use a building here, in terms of the mass, the shape, being a little literal. I didn't feel a student was literal enough, so I'm just doing what I feel is more of an appropriate pull from the inspirational photograph. So here I'm just blocking it out. I have the photograph obviously on a different layer. I'm checking this perspective, seeing where my vanishing points are. And the student decided to do a landscape with cliffs and some waterfalls and a river in the foreground. So I'm going to dramatize it up a little bit. I'm trying not to change the original image. I'm trying to respect the fact that the camera angle and the lighting, so that it isn't a complete change. Just applying the original image a little more. So I'm using just a texture brush, getting some texture in the rocks there. A lot of randomization. When you're doing images for film, especially landscapes and interiors, you need to think about big statements, because a lot of the times, especially in the film, the image isn't on the screen for a very long time, so you have to let the audience, you have to kind of spoon feed the audience a little in terms of what they're looking at. You have to be a little bit more literal, even the reality. So that's why a lot of this concept art that you see out there is pretty dynamic. It's just by way of what they're doing it for. I expect it's similar in games. So here I'm just pulling out some texture here, and we're just checking my perspective because I want these striations in the rocks. And again, the striations will give it drama and give it, again, it's basic composition. Your eyes drifting around to where the vanishing point could be and drifting around the image. You got to make it interesting. So here I'm just banging in some clouds in the background just to pull out the silhouette more of the cliffs. It's always good to have a handy cloud brush, so you're not hand airbrushing clouds, which is, when you hand airbrush atmosphere, clouds and mist, it just looks very planned, and in nature it's not planned, it's very random. So if you have a good smoke brush or a good cloud brush that you can program to do random shapes and applications, it just really helps with the end result. Here I'm just blocking in the water in the bottom and some of the punching up some of the rocks here on the left. Again, making it more dramatic, and keeping in mind, of course, our three levels: foreground, midground, and background. Those are the basics. So I'm constantly checking between the foreground, the midground, and background in terms of the uh, in terms of the tones and how much atmosphere and detail I need in there. Here I'm just banging in some rocks at the bottom as if you gotta, when you're doing landscapes, you gotta think about what's happened and what's happening. Here the rocks have fallen to the base of the cliff, and they're constantly falling over time. So there's a story there. There's always a story behind designs, and it just gives it depth and believability instead of just doing a cliff with water falling down it. There's reasons for things being. So here I'm just using the preset. I'll be using the preset chalk brush. I'm gonna make the waterfall here. It's a pretty simple, straightforward technique. And you know, this whole image here is something that you do on a job. You'd bang these out pretty quick through a day, probably anywhere from 5 to 10, depending on the subject matter, depending on you know how much detail and what's going on. But these are pretty standard, these black and white images, to get the idea across. And a lot of concept artists, or a lot of starting concept artists don't realize the importance of speed, and they show their work and it's beautiful, but it's taken them a long time to do. So over time, practicing on getting faster and faster is really crucial, because when you're out there on the job, you have to really think fast on your feet and understand big statements in terms of your work, and getting the big statements down so that you can move forward instead of spending a lot of time fiddling with things. And because you don't, a lot of times, most of the time, you don't have that much leeway in terms of time. So I'm just texturing, pulling out some stuff here on the rocks and giving it some tooth. Here I'm just adding a bit of reflection into the water of the cliffs. So I just duplicated the cliff layer, flipped it vertically and brought it down, and just going to cheat it a little. I'm working with the opacity. So this is running about 3 times as fast as I painted this. So I still painted it pretty fast. I think it was about 45 minutes. So here I have a splatter brush, and again, just like the atmosphere brush or the cloud brush, it's a pre-made brush, and I have a number of different water splatters, because as you do these images, you're doing a combination of pre-made brushes and you know, just using your own inherent skill to just do standard painting. So it's a combination of technical abilities and your own abilities to pull these images together quickly. You know, on the job, like I said, you don't want to be painting splatters for hours. You just want to bang them in there and There's a story, you're done. Because the image isn't about the splatters, the image is about the image, the whole thing. The splatters are the icing on the cake, and you don't want to go too crazy and spend too much time on things like that. So here I'm doing more of a layer of mist here. If you look at waterfalls like Niagara Falls, for example, at the bottom, it just creates so much mist and condensation. So just taking that into account. The mist also helps with depth. So here on the left in the foreground rocks, I'm adding some more texture. I try not to use, I hear some people like, yeah, I got 300 brushes and I use pretty much all of them. And I don't do that at all. I use a handful of brushes and teach myself how to use them for everything I do. The way I work, I just don't need to spend time scrolling through brushes and fiddling around with things like that. I like to get the work down and not rely too much on the tech. Something like this could be used on a job to hand over to a matte painter, or if you're the matte painter, you can take this to a photoreal level, and you've got something here to start off with instead of starting off cold. So my student had some birds, and so I respected that and put some birds in myself. They're always a good way to give scale and just give some life to an image, some organic life. If I had done this again, I would probably have the birds on the left rock instead of right in the middle of the image, but these are things that you correct as you go on. And here I'm just softening up the tops of the cliffs, so it's not so severe, it doesn't look so cut out. Just working on the levels here. We're almost there. So here I used unsharp mask under filters, and I duplicated my layer, and the foreground rocks here that I'm isolating, I've unsharp masked on a higher level than the background rocks to give it more grit and again to add more depth to it. So there we are. There's the original and there's the new one. Thank you for watching. See you next time.